Well, hello and welcome all you wonderful people out there in YouTube land to the Texas Special YouTube channel. Sitting here before you is a Bachmann Santa Fe, or AT&sf, number 3283060 steam switcher. This is, of course, in scale. Now, for those of you that don't know, the 060 is derivative of the wheel arrangement. So steam locomotives are classified by wheel arrangements, whereas diesel locomotives are more commonly characterized by their model designation. In the real world, these guys were used for switching in yards, light branch lines, local service, spotting and pulling customers, and they were owned by both railroads and non-railroad entities. For instance, lumber mills, even universities that had their own private coal-fired power plants, and hospitals owned these little small guys. The wheel arrangement comes from 0 leading wheels, no leading truck, pilot truck, whatever you want to call it, 6 driving wheels, and no trailing truck or 0 wheels behind the driving wheels. So these were just about anywhere and everywhere you could think of where a small light duty steam locomotive would be needed to move around, to shuffle around a handful of cars. These were definitely not main line heavy haul power, even when they were brand new. They were destined for the yard. They had small drive wheels, so they didn't go very fast, and they were well suited to that purpose. As far as this model goes, this is a fairly common model of steam locomotive. Not only the wheel arrangement, but this specific model itself. Bachmann is not your upper echelon, it isn't scale trains or Broadway limited, but it is realistically what most of us in the hobby get our start with. That's pretty much the only name in the game nowadays with starter sets in scale. Them, Kato, and I believe Pico has a few in scale sets. But by and large, if you're a newbie in the hobby and you start off with a starter set, you're going to more than likely be starting off with a Bachmann set. This is the same locomotive, generally speaking, that you would find in a couple of the Bachmann starter sets that would have a Santa Fe 060. I believe there's 2 or 3 different sets that they have. The handrail along the boiler here is separately applied. It is a separately applied wire. The stanchions for the hand railing, there's only a handful of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, which is not prototypically correct by my knowledge, but it is what it is. This is a lower end locomotive. You could pick one of these up from trainworld.com for right around $70. Or you could find them as cheap as $25 on eBay. You have the air compressor here. You have some piping that is molded onto the plastic boiler here. The cab windows, they're one-piece windows that are molded as part of the cab. The lettering and numbering on the engine is very nicely done. The drive rods, the valve gear and everything on this engine is a little Spartan but nicely done. All the wheels on this locomotive, as well as the rods and linkages, have all been chemically darkened, so they don't have, while they do have a metallic sheen to them, they're not just bare stainless. This is a DC model. It could very easily be converted to DCC, because there's absolutely nothing in the tender. So there'd be plenty of space in the tender to add a DCC decoder. You have nice rivet detailing here along the sides of the tender body. You have some pretty good little detailing on the trucks of the tender. You have these molded on cab steps here on the tender. You have a molded on grab iron here. And you have a polling rod here. Polling is a now illegal and out of date practice where if you have a car that didn't make it all the way into the clear of an adjacent track on a switch, you put one end of this pole in a polling pocket located on the corner of the car nearest the locomotive, and the other end of the pole either here or here. On either side there would be polling pockets, and you use the pole to just shove you use the pole to shove that car into place, or at least far enough into the clear where you can run the locomotive past it and do a good spot. The drawbar on these guys is kind of unique, I guess you could call it. It is a current carrying drawbar to allow for the current pickups here on the wheels. So to undo it, you twist it and lift it off, and you can see the top of the drawbar has these little brass contacts on top of a printed PC board, which is the drawbar itself is printed PC board, and that allows for electrical pickup to go from the leading wheel of the leading truck of the tender to the engine. Since it's such a short wheelbase locomotive, that helps it get over switches and diamonds and things and such that much easier. While we're looking at the tender here, you can see some non-slip tread on the plate there between the tender and what would be the locomotive. Looking at the front of the tender, you see the doors for the coal bunker there. You have a little coal scoop, and what kind of looks like a pickaxe right there, molded onto the doors. As we go to the top of the tender, of course you have the hand railing and the little steps molded onto the back slope of the water tank on the tender. And these types of tenders were used for additional visibility. You know, you can see the switchman or the conductor on the ground better, so they give you either car counts or if the switch is lined or things and such of that nature. You have a non-functioning headlight here. You have a cast-in coal load with additional tools, a couple of scoops just tossed in the coal, and you have some more rivet detailing. The top of the pilot on the rear of the tender is smooth. And looking at the rear of the tender, you can see this Rapido style coupler here, which I hate those, but it's not my engine, so I'm not going to mess with it. You have some non-slip tread here on the footboards of the pilot, and you have a better shot of that non-functional rear headlight. Looking at the locomotive, you'll see that the cab is where the motor is. There's nowhere on this engine for cab detailing because the entire cab is occupied by the motor. If we look at the top of the engine, you can see there are some molded on roof flaps, and you have a screw right here. This screw actually helps hold, well, it doesn't help, it holds the body, this plastic body of the locomotive, this shell, on the frame and the motor and everything. If you unscrew that, then you have access to all of the innards of the engine. You've got a bell, you've got a whistle, you've got the turbo generator and pop-off valve here. This is where the builder's plate would go. Looking at the head end of the locomotive, you can see this is a non-functioning headlight. You have this hole here in the center of the smoke box door which isn't prototypically correct, but is what it is. You have nice latch and rivet detailing around the perimeter of the smoke box door, and of course the hinges here. And you have a somewhat nicely detailed pilot on the Locomotive, as well as of course the footboards with the non-slip tread and a solid one-piece Bachmann knuckle coupler, which I'm suspecting this engine actually came installed with on the rear of the tender, but for whatever reason the person that owned this previously swapped it out to the Rapidos. I'm going to get a train assembled on Ethan Tait's hollow core door layout, and we're going to see how this guy handles the Tait Proving Grounds.